Hey, Dan. Let me see. I can't hear you.
How about now?
Now I can.
Okay, awesome. All right, I see Sagar. What's going on, buddy?
Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Oh, outstanding. Julie Sagar was one of the poor suckers that I suckered into helping me organize the program for the last DevOps days. So he was the person reviewing paper call with me.
Well, thanks for inviting Maddie to speak and then letting me speak for him.
Yeah.
Ah.
Worked out pretty well.
How have is this your first meetup?
No, we've been doing this since mid 2017.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I just meant since we aren't doing conferences anymore.
For the time being, yeah.
No, this is what, after coronavirus started, Dan, this is what, our third?
Yeah, something like that.
The meetup? Yeah.
Yep.
Nice. Yeah, the last place I went was LA for Scale.
When was that?
That was March 7th, I think, is when I flew in.
Yeah, that's right.
LA. Yeah.
Damn.
Seems like forever ago.
Yeah, everybody's going a little crazy. Even for us hardcore introverts, it is just getting old. All right, we had a pretty good RSVP list. We were over 30 last time I saw. Now,
And I think a couple of people from PagerDuty might actually join just off of my calendar invite link.
Oh, no, not PagerDuty.
I know. Can't take us anywhere.
Those people, they're just here lowering property values. Well, I've got some people showing up from my my place of work as well. I'm going to be super interested to see what you have to say. I was, we'll give everybody a little time to jump in here, but I was reviewing a video on Scrum, or sort of. I mean, this person was talking about the importance of about thinking ahead, was kind of in developing a good model, and he was trying to make the case that it's the person with business knowledge and technical knowledge in their head at the same time. That's the person that's the premium. And we're getting to a point where technical knowledge alone, coding knowledge alone is almost worthless. You've got to know something about a business model. And it was fascinating to listen to him because he was clearly great at Scrum. And you could also tell that he was pretty frustrated that he understood Scrum, and it seemed like nobody else did. Which I see a lot.
Well, we definitely talk these days about people understanding the business outcomes and having that understanding beyond just, writing code, but understanding what it means to the business, right? And making sure that we're all aligned to the same outcomes. And I apologize if I'm a little tired today. I've been up since 4 a.m. Idaho time, which is actually like 5 a.m. your time, I think, because Idaho is the forgotten time zone in Mountain here. We had our PagerDuty summit in EMEA today. So we were really excited. We had Patrick Dubois. He came and spoke, which was just always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah, I've seen him speak. He's wonderful.
Yeah. But the day is wearing on a little bit longer than I thought.
I can imagine. Yeah, Patrick Dubois is that guy on Twitter. He always has that great question that he posts. That's, it's always something simple, and it's, wow, I should have thought of that. It's a great question. The grandfather of DevOps.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, hi, I'm Julie. I live in Idaho.
Indeed.
People oftentimes get us confused for Iowa, Ohio, or Texas. I don't know why in TV shows they always give us Texan accents. Maybe it's because we're a large state. I don't know.
That's a probably a meetup in itself. Why does Idaho get confused with Texas?
I will say that it was 90 degrees over the weekend, and then it snowed in the mountains today.
Wow.
So we're having we get really hot here, but we don't have the humidity that you have down there, which I discovered isn't fun. It's dry heat up here.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I recently, I'm a big fan of Amazon's Audible. And so I recently reviewed the Great Courses. They have these lecture series called the Great Courses, and you get them on all kinds of topics. They have professors come in and they speak on their topic of expertise. And this one fella did a 50 lecture series, 50 half-hour lectures on geology. And I took it because I had no idea. I don't know much about geology. And so it was fascinating. It was frankly fascinating. But one of the things he covered was, the mantle, the inner core of the earth, all the way out to the climate and the weather. And he started talking about weather and climate in the context of geology. And you have no idea how complex weather is. It's amazingly complex on all kinds of timescales. The cycles and stuff operate. And of course, you have the outlier of the volcano. The super volcano out there that in Yellowstone goes off.
Oh yeah, I know. We're out of luck in Idaho. If the volcano goes off, and if anybody's been paying attention to our news, which I don't know why anybody would, we've been having a series of earthquakes, some good ones here. I don't know if you have earthquakes in Texas. Do you have earthquakes in Texas?
Yeah. Well, no, not as much, but there have been a couple in Oklahoma.
Oh, well, yeah.
It's close. Well, I think we've given it 5 minutes. So let's go ahead and jump in here. Okay, everybody, thank you for joining the virtual DevOps Meetup for this month, June. Looks like we are almost through to the end of the first half of the year. So everybody take that big sigh. We're halfway through 2020. We're gonna make it. Just keep your eyes on the prize. We're gonna get through this year. This is a fantastic topic. Can't wait to get to it. Julie is queued up. She is just fired up, ready to go. She's not tired. She's ready to blow your minds with this fantastic presentation. But I did want to take a short minute to introduce you to the DevOps Meetup. The Houston DevOps Meetup was founded in 2017 when the cloud hit me like a ton of bricks. And it started, as I started doing more and more stuff in cloud, I noticed that there was more and more technologies out there, and it was almost impossible to know it all. It was moving so fast. And it dawned on me that, well, we live in Houston, Texas, and there's a lot of developers, a lot of talented developers, and many large and small and all kinds of businesses. So I thought, well, it makes sense to mine that network, find better ways to do things quicker, because we've got some enormous challenges that we have to solve. Not the least of which some of the things that Houston is excellent at, including things like energy and aerospace and those kind of things. Houston has people that are willing to roll up their sleeves, some really talented developers, but we do need to develop that developer community. So the Houston DevOps Meetup's about that. It's about getting together every month, sharing information, talking about what we're seeing, talking about what we're doing. Some of the meetups are more technical. Some of them are a little bit more on the culture side, because if you know anything about DevOps, there's a strong cultural component to it. And you have to know how to do a little bit of the soft stuff as well as a little bit of the technical stuff. This particular talk, I think, is going to be, it's going to hit you right between the eyes, because I remember reading in the recent Google State of DevOps report that they have hard data. The good people at Dora had put together some hard data showing that the thing that separates good Scrum teams from excellent Scrum teams is retrospectives. Doing retrospectives. And Blameless Postmortems are a cousin of that, and they are something that we want to be able to talk to people in a safe kind of space, in a safe kind of way, saying this is what we needed to do, this is what we could do better when we are in a postmortem kind of situation. So having said all that, I will punt it all over to Julie. And Julie, I will let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. And when you get a chance, will you enable screen sharing for me? So, well, I live, normally I include a little map of where Idaho is in the United States because people struggle with that. But we're in the Pacific Northwest in the Mountain Time Zone. Actually, Dan, what you were saying, that rings true to me. So I'm the founder of DevOps Days Boise, which this year would have been our 5th year. That will now be next year, because we were supposed to be in May. But one of the reasons to bring DevOps Days to Boise was because as I traveled around the country attending conferences, and I would tell people I'm from Idaho, the response would be, what, you have tech in Idaho? It was really frustrating, actually, because we do, and we have people here, and we do more than potatoes. But also it was seeing that need, right? And filling that need to be prepared for what the future was going to be, and to have people understand that we have a lot more here than Micron, which we do. Dan, yeah? I think I lost the ability to hear you, but I can share my screen now.
Okay.
All right. Now, can you all see the pretty green slide here?
Yes.
Okay, well, hopefully it's pretty green to you all. So I founded DevOps Days Boise. I co-organized DeliveryConf in Seattle with some of the other organizers of DevOps Days around the country. And then I do some writing for opensource.com, and I'm a DevOps advocate here at PagerDuty. And actually, really, Blameless Postmortems, they are exciting to me because I talk to a lot of organizations that don't share learnings, or that want to know how to share learnings, but being able to do a postmortem in a way that doesn't lay blame. And we tend to stay away from the term root cause, right? Because that can generally point towards one person, and we want to talk about how complex our systems are and look at contributing factors. So with that, I'll just jump right in. Now, if I can figure out how to make the chat work, you know, I can save questions till the end, or I've got the chat open, and if we want to pause and have this be more interactive instead of forever of just me talking straight, feel free to pop in questions. A lot of this is how we do things at PagerDuty, and we've iterated on this over the years. So when we talk about postmortems, we talk about a postmortem as the process that's intended to help you learn from past incidents, right? So retrospectives aren't always around incidents, but they might be around a major product launch or a big project. Postmortems are around those past incidents, and it involves that blame-free analysis and discussion soon after that event has taken place. And then you produce the artifact, which includes that detailed description of exactly what went wrong to contribute to that incident, along with the list of steps taken in order to prevent that similar incident from occurring again in the future. And then it's important to understand the analysis of how the incident response process itself worked during the incident. That should also be included in this discussion, because the value of postmortems, it comes from helping institutionalize that culture of continuous improvement. And so during incident response, the team is 100% focused on restoring the service, and that's where their focus should be. They cannot and should not be wasting time and mental energy thinking about how to do something optimally or performing that deep dive on what caused the incident. That's why postmortems are essential. They provide that peacetime opportunity to reflect once there's no longer an issue impacting users. And so there are all sorts of common words used for postmortems, right? It can be any one of these things. And we call them postmortems at PagerDuty. Generally, what you call them doesn't matter. I will sometimes get on a soapbox and talk about root cause analysis, which you'll probably hear me say a few times during this, this little talk here, because it's really about how words matter during blamelessness, but also understanding that sometimes people identify with certain words. And so root cause is really ingrained. So don't feel too bad when I get on my soapbox on that. And then without a postmortem, you really fail to recognize what you're doing right, where you could improve, and then kind of how important, the most important thing is to avoid those mistakes in the future. So writing an effective postmortem, it allows you to learn quickly from your mistakes and improve your systems and processes. And a well-designed blameless postmortem, they allow teams to continuously learn. They serve as that way to iteratively improve your infrastructure and incident response process. So we want to be sure to write detailed and accurate postmortems in order to get the most benefit out of them. And when we talk about when should you do a postmortem, you should really do a postmortem after every major incident. And this actually includes any time that the incident response process is triggered, even if it's later discovered that the severity was actually lowered, or it was a false alarm, or it quickly recovered without intervention. A postmortem shouldn't be neglected in those cases, because that's still an opportunity to review what did and didn't work well in the incident response process. And if the incident shouldn't have triggered a response, it's worthwhile to understand why it did so that you can tune your monitoring to avoid unnecessary incident triggering in the future. And then by doing that analysis, it's going to help prevent that alert fatigue going forward. And so just as
Julie.
resolving, oh yeah, did somebody say something?
Yeah, Julie, I got a question
Yeah.
about that. You seem to indicate that one of the points was that it's not necessarily just about the code when you're doing a postmortem. There's this idea of, well, what triggered it? Was it a valid trigger? Well, there's the response, there is the operational response, there's the getting the code back up and running, there's the tactical thing, and then there's the strategic aspect of it. So you have to cover all these bases. What's the order of covering all that? Where do you start?
Well, we'll talk about that actually with some practical ways of how you do this, and where you really start actually on all of this is before the incident actually started. So you go back in time, then you work your way forward instead of working your way backward. But one of the reasons too for doing this, even when an incident was triggered and then it was later downgraded or resolved quickly, is because practice. You always want to practice and keep iterating on these processes to make sure that they're working for your organization as well. And so that's why we talk about the importance of doing these quickly. Like I said, resolving a major incident, it's top priority when it occurs. When it occurs, the postmortem, it's prioritized over planned work. Completing the postmortem, you have to think about it as that final step of the incident response process, and delaying it delays the key learnings that will prevent the incident from recurring in the future. So like our policy at PagerDuty is 3 business days for a SEV 1 and 5 business days for a SEV 2. And because scheduling can just be a nightmare, we actually schedule on a shared calendar, and the expectation is actually set that people will adjust their meetings to attend the postmortem, so that you're not trying to wrangle a bunch of people. And that is an expectation that is set by the VP of engineering and product and widely accepted within the organization. And Dan, I see a little smile out of you right there.
Well, yeah, if you can dodge the postmortem, you dodge it.
Right. And, there's questions that I get about whether or not a postmortem meeting is actually required, or whether or not you can do this stuff in Slack. And we'll talk about why a meeting is important as well. And who's responsible for the postmortem? So at PagerDuty, we use an incident response process. There's an incident commander. And the incident commander directly notifies one of the responders to own completing the postmortem, but it's very important to understand that writing a postmortem is a collaborative effort. So that's the person just in charge of wrangling people. And you want to designate that single person to avoid bystander effect. So for example, if somebody's having a heart attack and you're in a group of people, which hopefully we're not all in a group of people right now, but you're in a big group, somebody's having a heart attack, you're performing CPR, you don't just say, someone call 911. I say, Dan, call 911, or you call 911, because otherwise everybody's just going to stand around assuming somebody else is going to do it. So you do the same thing with the postmortem, and you designate that single person as the owner, but again, it's collaborative. And so some of the ownership criteria is like, did they take a leadership role during the incident? Did they perform a task that led to stabilizing the service? Maybe they were the primary on call, or maybe they were the person that manually triggered the incident to initiate that incident response. And it turns out that postmortems, they're not a punishment. The owner isn't the person that caused the incident. Effective postmortems are blameless. You're going to hear that over and over and over. Systems are complex. There's never a single cause. You can talk about the 5 whys of doing a postmortem, asking why, and then why again, and then why again, and why again. And generally it takes those 5 whys to get down to all those contributing factors. And so just remembering that that owner is accountable for just performing the select administrative tasks and driving that to completion. But now, let's talk about blame. In the Field Guide to Understanding Human Error, Sidney Decker describes two views on human error. There's that old view, which asserts that people's mistakes cause failure, and then the new view, which treats human error as a symptom of a systematic problem. And that old view is really, bad apples. And if you remove the bad apples, you're going to prevent failure. So if we kick Dan out, our systems are never going to go down, right? That view attaches an individual's character to their actions and assumes that there's negligence or bad intent that led to the error or the incident. And that's what we try to get away from. And so an organization that follows that old view of human error, they may respond to incidents by finding that careless individual who caused the incident so that they can be reprimanded. And in these cases, engineers hesitate to speak up when incidents occur because they're afraid of being blamed. And that silence can increase your mean time to acknowledge and your mean time to resolve. And it just makes incidents worse if people are afraid to say something. So for postmortems to result in learning and system improvements, we want to look at that new view of human error. In complex systems of software development, there's a variety of conditions that lead to failure. And the goal of the postmortem is to understand what those systematic factors were that led to the incident and identify the actions that can prevent it from reoccurring. And so the blameless postmortem, it stays focused on how a mistake was made instead of who. And that's very key, how instead of who. And it's a crucial mindset leveraged by leading organizations to ensure that postmortems have the right tone and do empower engineers to give that objective account of what happened by eliminating that fear of punishment. But it's hard. It's like easy for us to all agree that we want a culture of continuous improvement. It's really difficult to practice the blamelessness required for learning because the unexpected nature of failure, it leads humans to react in a way that we can easily interpret our understanding, right? And when we process information, what do? We take unconscious shortcuts. And so the mind can optimize for timeliness over accuracy, and then that can produce the incorrect conclusion, which is actually a cognitive bias. And so J. Paul Reed, he actually argues that blamelessness is a myth because the tendency to blame is so hardwired through millions of years of evolutionary biology. And so ignoring the tendency and trying to eliminate it is impossible. And so we can also talk about just being blame aware. And we're going to touch upon a few of the biases. Lindsay Holmwood, she wrote a great article on cognitive biases that you can read more into to becoming aware of those when completing the postmortems. But there's fundamental attribution error, which is the tendency to believe that what people do reflects their character rather than their circumstances. And that's that old view of human error, the bad apple theory. It's assigning responsibility for failure to a bad actor who was clearly careless and incompetent. But it's funny because we tend to explain our own actions by our context, not our personality. So one of the ways to combat this tendency to blame is by intentionally focusing the analysis on situational causes rather than discrete actions taken by individuals. And then you've got the cognitive bias that's confirmation bias, which is the tendency to favor information that reinforces our existing beliefs. So when we're presented with ambiguous information, we try to interpret it in a way that it supports our assumptions. So if you combine that with that old bad apple view, that can really cause a lot of problems because it seeks to, again, blame somebody. So when approaching the analysis with this assumption that an individual is at fault, you're always going to find support that belief was accurate. So Homewood, she suggests appointing somebody to play a devil's advocate to take a contrarian viewpoint during an investigation. But you want to also be careful not to introduce negativity or combativeness with a devil's advocate. You can also counter this by inviting someone from another team. Interns and junior folks are really, really great to bring into these because they may come at these situations with other viewpoints that we may not be thinking of after 20 years or 10 years or however many years experience, and then they might have different lines of inquiry and other ways of thinking. And then hindsight bias, which is great memory distortion, right? Because we recall events in a way to form a judgment. So that's like saying, I knew that was going to happen. I knew this incident was going to happen. And it's super easy to go ahead and see something as predictable, despite really having no basis for predicting it, because we recall events in ways that make ourselves look better. So an example is when a person analyzing the cause of an incident believed they knew it would happen. And then this bias, it leads to division and defensiveness within a team. So you want to avoid this by explaining events in terms of foresight and head. And so we talk about starting your timeline before the incident took place and working your way forward instead of working your way backward from resolution to kind of combat the hindsight bias. And then negativity bias, like the notion that things of more of a negative nature have a greater effect on one's mental state than those of a neutral or positive nature. And social, like research on social judgments have shown that negative information, it disproportionately impacts a person's impression of others. So it goes back to that bad apple theory, that belief that there's negative actors in your organization that are to blame for those failures. And studies have also shown that people are more likely to attribute negative outcomes to the intentions of another person rather than neutral or positive outcomes. And this kind of also explains our tendency to blame people's character to explain a major incident. And you have to remember that in reality, things go right more often than they go wrong, but we tend to magnify the importance of negative effects. So reframing incidents as learning opportunities and remembering to describe what was handled well and what went right, it will balance the perspective. Yeah, there, Dan is asking, how do you know your postmortem is effective or ineffective? Are there warning signs that a postmortem is going bad and needs to be truncated? We actually have some advice around that. I also can tell you, we're going to talk about who we should involve in the postmortem here as well. And then we'll talk about having a facilitator during your postmortem and also a community of postmortem writers that can review it to make sure that it's written well and in a blameless fashion while you're learning how to do this. So here's just some of the biases that we talked about. And I'll send you this slide deck, Dan, so you can share it out with people. So I don't need to read all of these out to you, but just here's some way that you can look at the biases and then ways to reframe them. So for like negativity, I can't believe this happened again. It just feels like it's getting worse and worse. We're never going to get ahead of this. We aren't investing enough. Instead of, you know, this type of incident has happened 3 times in the last 6 months. What options can we consider to prevent this or reduce the frequency? There are ways to reframe. But acknowledging blame, as we mentioned, it's easier said than done. So let's talk about some behaviors. Asking what questions? What did you think was happening? What did you do next? What questions grounds that analysis in the big picture of contributing factors to the incident? And then John Allspaw wrote an article, The Infinite Hows, that encourages us to ask like how questions, because they get people to describe the conditions that allowed the event to take place. And then actually Lindsay Homewood notes that how questions can help clarify those technical details, distancing people from the actions they took. So that's just one way to look at it. You can also consider multiple and diverse perspectives. So like I said, when you bring in more junior folks, if you need to, look at how you're asking those questions. If you're going to go down the 5 whys, we want to ask those questions in a way that aren't asking, Robert, why? Why did you do this? Right? So it's about thinking about the way that your questions are framed. And then we may fall into those like villain, victim, helpless stories that propel those emotions to justify behavior. And we can move beyond blame by telling the rest of the story. So consider your role and other people's roles and ask why a reasonable, rational, and decent person may have taken this action that seems to have caused the incident. And that will turn the attention towards the systematic failures, because you have to remember, you know, you're one deploy away from causing a major incident, right? And so anybody could have done it. Also, we talk about abstracting to an in-specific responder, and we do this during our postmortems as well, so that you're not seeing the same person's name over and over and over again. You can abstract to an in-specific responder to remove some of that blame that can be passed down, especially from more the executive level who aren't as involved in just reading these. I mean, if I'm seeing Robert's name over and over and over again, I'm going to start to wonder, right? And being blameless doesn't mean not having accountability. And I do want to point that out. If somebody is consistently doing the same thing over and over and over again, that's an accountability issue versus the blamelessness. And those conversations can be kept out of the postmortem and had more on that one-on-one basis. And as leaders, you have to introduce the blameless postmortems as well. You need to have both top-down buy-in and individual contributor buy-in as well. You want to encourage a culture of continuous improvement, but you need that commitment from leadership that no individuals are going to be reprimanded after the incident. And it can be difficult to get this buy-in when management holds that old view, that bad actor view. And so you want to talk to them about the value of postmortems. And you want to convince management to shift to this blameless analysis by clarifying how blame can be harmful to the business, what it can do to those mean time to resolve numbers. You want to talk about that, how silence increases the impact of incidents. And when you're selling the business value of blamelessness to leadership, do try to avoid blaming them for not doing this before, because that is not the best way to do it. And again, you want to acknowledge that practicing blamelessness is difficult for everyone, and ask leadership if they're going to be receptive to receiving feedback if they accidentally suggest blame after an incident. Remember, nobody's perfect at the beginning, and we're constantly practicing these things, and especially when we've got a lot of ingrained behaviors. The verbal commitment from management to refrain from punishing people is an important start, but it's not going to eliminate that fear of blame. Once you have that leadership support, you want the buy-in from the individual contributors who are performing the postmortem, and you want to share with them that you have the commitment from management that no one's going to be punished. Because the tendency to blame, it's not unique to managers. You want to explain to the team why blame is harmful to trust and collaboration, and you want to agree to work together to be more blame aware. Psychological safety. I mean, Dan, you were just talking about the Google reports, right? The #1 factor on high performing teams is psychological safety. And people need to feel safe talking about that failure before they're willing to speak up on incidents. And Amy Edmondson, the Harvard Business School professor, she defined psychological safety as a sense of confidence that the team won't embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up. And this describes what we're trying to achieve with blameless postmortems. And it's the key driver of high performing teams. I mean, that was also in the Dora report. So the #1 thing you can do is build that culture. So start small. You have to remember that change doesn't happen overnight. So if you're introducing a new practice into your organization, you want to start small. Maybe even start with incidents that aren't SEV 1 or SEV 2, or do these on applications that aren't critical, so that there's less stress involved with your initial postmortem, so that you can practice in those environments. You also want to share your information. Sharing the results of the postmortem, it increases systems knowledge across the organization, and it reinforces that blameless culture. When they're shared widely, teams will see that individuals didn't get blamed or punished for incidents, and that reduces that fear of speaking up, and that's creating that culture where sharing leads to continuous learning and people are working together. Also, create a community of experienced postmortem writers to review drafts. So this goes directly towards that question of, are there warning signs that a postmortem is going bad and needs to be truncated? These folks will review it so that they can look for any of those, and that's things where blame is being assigned. You'll also have some facilitators in your meeting that can help stop this. And you want to share the information. So at PagerDuty, all of our postmortems meetings are scheduled on a shared calendar, and anybody's actually able to join. and the postmortems are sent out to distribution lists that you can subscribe to. So they're not a secret. We want to show that that failure isn't a bad thing, that you can learn from it. So schedule that on a shared calendar so that everybody can see it. And again, that also helps you with your scheduling of the postmortem meeting, because people will join your meeting instead of you scheduling around them. And email the completed postmortems to everybody in the organization as part of that final step in the incident. And it doesn't have to be everybody, excuse me, you can have distribution lists that they can subscribe to. But you want to share that because it's going to widen everybody's systems knowledge. And information sharing and transparency, it supports that environment of accountability. A common challenge to effective postmortems is that after analyzing the incident and creating action items to prevent reoccurrence, the information sharing and the transparency is never done. So just a couple of quick tips for success. Clarify policy and ownership of postmortem action items. For action items to get done, they have to have clear owners. Because we're an agile and DevOps shop, the cross-functional teams responsible for the affected services, they're part of the meeting, and we have policies set around when action items will be completed. So our VP of engineering has set the expectation that high priority action items to prevent a SEV 1 from reoccurring should be completed in 15 days after the incident, and for SEV 2 within 30 days. And that expectation is communicated across the organization to make sure that it's adhered to, because I get that question a lot. Well, we have action items, but they never get done, right? And that's another benefit of having that postmortem meeting, because you're gaining the buy-in on those action items and you're engaging those leaders. So you want product managers there because they're responsible for defining the good customer experience, and incidents are, bad customer experience. So you want product managers there because it's explaining to them that they have a wider picture of the threats to the customer experience, and they can share ideas on how to improve that experience. And it also gives engineering a chance to explain the importance of action items so that product managers will prioritize that work accordingly. And get your engineering leadership more involved too, to give them a better understanding of system weaknesses so that they can understand how they should invest their technical resources. And sharing this context with the leaders that prioritize work, it also allows them to support the team to actually complete the work from the action items that has been determined. And it's the postmortem meeting, you're there to get buy-in for the action plan. Like, this is an opportunity to discuss those action items and to brainstorm other options and gain consensus amongst leadership, because the ROI, it may not actually be great enough to justify the work for an action item that might delay other priorities. And this is your time to discuss that and agree on what to do and when to do it. And then here's a suggestion of people that we have participate in the postmortem. So that's the incident commander. We have a scribe, a deputy, and customer liaisons on our call. Any of the service owners, and you want product managers and engineering managers to be part of the postmortem meetings. And then if it hasn't already been done by the incident commander, that postmortem owner, they need to create a new empty postmortem for the incident. They can go through the history. We use Slack, so go through the history in Slack to identify them, identify the responders, and add them to the page so they can start populating the postmortem. And then you want to include the incident commander, the deputy, and scribe as well, and include a link to the incident call recording. And you also want to invite stakeholders from related or impacted teams as well. And then you want to schedule that postmortem meetings for 30 minutes to an hour, and that depends on the complexity of the incident. And remember, have those set time frames, 3 business days for a SEV 1, 5 for a SEV 2, or whatever your organization picks as the time frames, but don't make it 2-3 weeks out, because you're going to lose a lot of the context in that time. And then again, people who should attend: service owners, engineering responders, engineering managers, product managers, customer liaisons, the incident commander. And then we also have a facilitator as well. And that may be something that you want to look at, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But then when we talk about the timeline, so start that timeline before the incident started, and you want to document the facts of what happened during the incident. And you want to like avoid evaluating what should or shouldn't have been done and coming to conclusions about what caused the incident. You want to present only the facts to help avoid blame. That's going to support a deeper analysis. And the timeline includes important changes in status, impact, and the key actions taken by responders. So to avoid that hindsight bias, start it in the past and review the incident log in Slack or whatever chat tool, I'm hoping it's not email, that you're using, to find the key decisions made and the actions taken during the response effort. And you want to include information that the team didn't know during the incident that in hindsight you wish you would have known. And you can find the additional information by looking at monitoring and logs and deployments related to the affected services. You'll take a deeper look at the monitoring during the analysis step, but you can start by adding the key events in your timeline related to the incident. So that's like deploys or customer tickets or hypothesis being tested, and include the changes to the incident status and the impact to the timeline. And then for each item in the timeline, you want to identify a metric or some third-party page where the data came from to help illustrate each point clearly and ensure that you're remaining rooted in fact rather than opinion. So that can be like a link to a monitoring graph or a log search or heck tweets, anything that shows that data point that you're trying to illustrate in your timeline. And so just some tips: stick to the facts, include changes to the incident, include key decisions, and illustrate each point with a metric. And then I'm going to pause to actually take a quick drink here. Are there any questions right now?
Yeah, I got a question, Julie.
Yeah, Dan.
I'm looking at this and I'm listening to the your approach to it, and it sounds like there's a lot of work. It sounds like if you have incidents too often, you're going to be doing nothing but responding in postmortems. Thoughts on that? I mean, is that kind of the point?
You know, if you're having incidents that are happening that frequently that it's hard to do the postmortems for, then the postmortems are going to be super beneficial for you, because what keeps causing those incidents and how can you prevent them from happening, right? And so that's, again, going back to, are there a bunch of action items that have just been put off over and over and over again, and this is a reoccurring incident? This is that learning as well. And like I said, you can start out by doing them on Sev 1s and Sev 2s. Some people do it for Sev 3s as well, but you can even just do it for only major incidents. But again, if there are so many incidents, you have to think about the time being taken up for the team to respond to those, and what can we do to prevent them. That's what the postmortem is all about, is preventing these from happening again in the future. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And it sounds like it's one of those things where, frankly, it should be a little bit painful. You know, if it's something that requires a postmortem, it's serious. I would think it's not just a run of the mill, like, whatever. Yeah,
it's exactly. And so when we talk about documenting the impact, we want to talk about how long was the impact visible. So how long were customers affected? And you want to note that length of time may actually differ from the response effort, because the impact may have started right before your response effort started. And then you want to think about how many customers were affected, how many customers wrote or called support, what functionality was affected, and how severely. And then now that you have that understanding of what happened during the incident, look further back in time to find the contributing factors, right? And we've talked about this. Technology is a complex network of relationships, and it's continuously changing. So Dr. Richard Cook, in his paper of How Complex Systems Fails, he says that because complex systems are heavily defended against failure, it's a unique combination of apparently innocuous failures that join to create a catastrophic failure. And then we won't talk about the word root cause here, because some people use that, but we want to understand that that can point to one person. And so You want to be careful during this analysis phase to understand that an individual's actions should not be considered a root cause. If I can drive one thing home, please, that's it, right there. And so effective analysis, that goes deeper than someone's mistake. And you want to assume that anybody could have made the same mistake, and that all practitioner actions are actually gambles, right? That's what we want to think about. So you want to start your analysis by looking at your monitoring for affected surfaces. And you want to search for irregularities like sudden spikes or flatlining when the incident began or leading up to the incident. You want to include commands or queries you use to look up the data and graph images, or again, the links from the monitoring tools alongside this analysis so others can see how the data was gathered, because we're rooting our facts in data. And this level of analysis, that's going to uncover superficial causes to the incident. And then the question is, ask why was the system designed in a way to make this possible? Answering that question, that's going to help uncover the contributing factors. Why did those design decisions seem to be the best decisions at that time? So helpful questions, okay, especially if you're having a ton of incidences. Is this an isolated incident or part of a trend? Is it a specific bug, or did we uncover a class of bugs we didn't anticipate? This is the thing. Was there work that the team chose not to do in the past that contributed to this incident? And you want to look, are there similar related incidents? Is this a larger trend? And will this issue get worse as we scale or use the service? Because then you can start to predict a little bit too. And you're thinking about that future state. And then follow-up actions. It may not be possible or worth the effort to completely eliminate the possibility of this occurring again. So consider how you can improve detection and mitigation of future incidents. Do you need better monitoring and alerting? How can you decrease the severity or duration? And also remember to identify actions that can make your incident response process better too. Like, go through that history in whatever chat tool you're using to do items that are raised during the incident, and make sure that those are documented as well. You can open tickets for those. There's no expectation that at this phase that you're resolving those tickets. And when you're talking about your action items, make sure that they're actionable, specific, and bound. So actionable, you want to phrase each action item starting with a verb. And for specific, you want to define each item's scope narrowly. And bounded, you want to word each action item to indicate how to tell when it's finished, as opposed to like open-ended and never-ending ongoing tasks that will just never be completed. And so here's some ideas for better wording, right? So for actionable, add alerting for all cases where the service returns greater than 1% errors. Instead, you can say fix the issue instead of saying investigate monitoring for this scenario. So there's different ways that you can word it. And then external messaging, super important, right? It's important to build trust with customers. I have a game that I play that constantly goes down. Not only do they ignore the fact that they go down, they never ever send out a postmortem. And it's remarkable and shocking how much they ignore that these things happened. And I do believe that it causes them customer loyalty, because it's ignoring your customers. And you want to talk about, what happened and what you're doing about it, without giving away the proprietary information about your technology and your organization. So your external messaging is a scrubbed version, sanitized, of your internal messaging. So it should include, a summary with 2 or 3 sentences to summarize what happened, and then what happened, summarize the contributing factors, and then what you're going to do about it. So a summary of action items. And maybe I'm a little bit more picky about my gaming company because I work here at PagerDuty, and I'm aware of some of these best practices. But when you look at all the comments that people post on social media, it actually clearly frustrates regular day-to-day users. And that's why it's important to get this information out. So as far as the postmortem review, we have a community of experienced postmortem writers that are able to review the postmortems for style and context. And that also avoids wasted time during the meeting. And things that we look for are, does it provide enough detail? Rather than just pointing out what went wrong, does it drill down to the underlying cause of the issue? And do we separate the what happened from how to fix it? Do the action items make sense? And are they well scoped? Is it understandable? Are we pointing at one person, or is blame attributed to nobody? Are we acting in a blameless fashion? And then we look at that external messaging, and does it resonate with customers, or is it going to really make them mad? So these are, things to make sure that the timeline is an accurate representation of events. Like, don't make stuff up. People do that. Define technical lingo, because we may know it, the general public may not. Separate what happened from how to fix it. Write those tasks in actionable, specific, and bound. And discuss how it fits into the understanding of the health and resiliency of systems affected. Things that you may not want to do. Don't use the word, let me go back to that. Don't use the word outage unless it really was an outage, because that doesn't accurately always reflect the impact of an incident. Outage is used too broadly, and customers may think that the product was completely fully unavailable, when most likely that wasn't the case, unless you're T-Mobile a couple of weeks ago when they were down for 12 hours, I think. And they actually did a very good job on keeping everybody updated on all of the issues. Don't change the details to make yourself look better. Be honest, otherwise postmortems lose their effectiveness. Don't name and shame people. You want to keep them blameless. So if someone deployed a change that broke things, it's not their fault. Everyone's collectively responsible for building the system. You want to avoid the concept of human error. Remember, it's very rarely a bad apple. And then don't just point out what went wrong. Look at the underlying cause of the issue. And then for the meeting, you want to have that meeting to discuss all of these things. So where I was asked if we can just do all this in Slack, theoretically you can, but if you don't have the meeting, you're not going to have the ability to get the buy-in and have the discussion around the action items to make sure that everybody is bought on. So when you're scheduling the meeting, send the postmortem document in advance. It doesn't have to be completed, but at least 24 hours in advance so that people can start reading through it. And then we want to talk about those action items and prioritize them, and this is the time to discuss it. And then you want to develop good facilitators. So facilitators tend to have a high level of emotional intelligence, and they can easily read the nonverbal cues to be able to understand how people are feeling. And that's how you stop people from being combative or starting to point the blame or not giving people an opportunity to talk during your postmortem meeting. And so great facilitators, agile coaches, project managers, people who can keep things focused, because they may be able to see, I can see Dan has something to say. Robert, can you go ahead and pause? Let's let Dan have a moment and chat. They're comfortable interrupting, and they can redirect conversation when it starts to go bad and down that rabbit hole to focus on those goals of outcomes. The facilitator's job is to keep on topic. So if you don't have a dedicated facilitator on your team, which they can have a similar on-call rotation for these meetings, definitely designate maybe the incident commander to be the facilitator or somebody to keep the call on topic. And then they prevent that one person from dominating. So you can say like, oh, I wasn't able to hear what so-and-so was saying. You can also say, hold that thought. I want to make sure so-and-so has a chance to finish what they're saying. If you've got somebody that's interrupting, they're also going to encourage contributions. So if you see that there are certain people that just haven't spoken up, you can do some things like, let's go around the room so we can hear from everybody, or you can ask, hey, so-and-so, what stood out to you so far? So-and-so, is there anything else that we might need to consider? And that's how you want to encourage contributions. Again, not a single root cause. You want to keep pointing that out. And then we've actually talked about some of this. So practice your postmortems. Practice makes perfect, and you want to keep practicing those. And that's why, if you're starting this out from scratch, go ahead and start with a non-critical app so that people can do this in a lower stress environment and prove out success. But also, when you have those incidents that get downgraded, that gives you a great opportunity to practice. And then just here's some of the key takeaways. Like postmortems are really important for continuous learning. And it helps you understand your systems. And we don't like blame because it's bad. And it disincentivizes people from talking up. And you want to support your team in psychological safety. Ask what and how rather than who or why. And if you're going to do the 5 whys, make sure that your why isn't focused on a specific person's actions. And then, of course, there's no single root cause, but a combination. And with that, what questions do you all have for me in the last few minutes that we have left? Do you have questions?
Chat.
And I'm sorry, where does this event fit in the Scrum events? I think I'm not understanding that question.
So my point here is that, okay, this is Narasimha Badtella. So hi everyone. So when I said actually the Scrum context, actually, basically this is a DevOps Days forum and, more related to the Scrum and, the way we do the thing. So my question is that, there is already a retrospective activity, that is at the end of each sprint we take, actually, we do that. So now there is another terminology coming into picture, that is a postmortem. So, I mean, is it a separate, actually, how often this event need to happen? And, I mean, you said actually, as and when the major incident happens, but, that disturbs the whole thing. You need to prioritize, you need to document, you need to take it into, decide, okay, which sprint it should go in and actionable. I mean, all these things will be there. How long, who should be involving in this? It's a very, actually, can you explain a little bit more? I mean, what is the team size? Is there a separate team that should be looking after these incidents, or only the sprint teams, actual daily development teams?
That's a great clarifying question. So postmortems are different than retros, right? Retros are planned. They're going to happen after your sprint reviews, after a major event, right? Nothing may have blown up or gone wrong. Postmortems those happen in the cases of you've had a major incident. So you're T-Mobile and you went down for 12 hours. And in that postmortem, you're going to be including the people who were part of who were part of the actual incident. So retrospectives, they're normally more planned and project oriented. So you're looking back on how the project ran. And so that's kind of the major difference there, I would say. So really postmortems, I would say they don't need to be done by every team.
So is it at the portfolio level? Is it at the organizational level or the team level? Like pandemic, coronavirus is a big pandemic. Nobody prepared. So, I mean, it's also a kind of actually, the instant, everybody, prepared instant team, and, there's a leadership actually, taking care of all those root causes, and how to prepare, how to respond to this event. So, I mean, what level actually this need to happen? I mean, is it at the team level, portfolio level, or, the enterprise level, these things need to happen?
That can really depend on the severity of the incident. So for an incident that caused a major national outage that garnered a lot of media attention, that may go all the way up to the CEOs participating in the postmortem, versus a smaller incident that was quickly resolved may just be the team and an engineering manager or two who are participating in the meeting to get the buy-in for the action items. So I would say that that's going to depend on the severity. But again, kind of the difference between the postmortem and the retrospective is when we host DevOps Days Boise, we always host a retrospective after DevOps Days Boise to talk about what worked well, what didn't work well, what could be improved, what ideas do we have for next time. Now, if we had DevOps Days Boise and we had, I don't know, an internet outage, because that's never happened at one of our conferences, right? Wi-Fi's never gone down. But maybe the Wi-Fi went down, or none of the speakers showed up, or the attendees couldn't get in. We might run a postmortem after that to look for all the contributing factors that allowed those failures to occur. Does that kind of help?
Okay. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So Julie, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. So it sounds like you were saying that there's a team of people that put together what amounts to a document on the incident, and that goes out before the postmortem meeting. So everybody has this list of this is what happened. Please review it. Then you get into the room. Is that how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. And when you send that out, and you can go to postmortems.pagerduty.com, there's actually a template document, a postmortem template in there. I'm actually grabbing it so I can pop it in the chat here. So this is kind of an example. And keep in mind, as much as I said, don't use root cause, I hope you all laugh when you look at this template and it says like root causes right there. You know, can't change the world overnight. So yeah, this gets filled out. So remember, you've designated that single owner. So, you know, you've told Dan, you're gonna, well, I'm gonna say Daniel this time, so I'm not always picking on you, Collins. You know, you've told Daniel, you're gonna own making sure this gets completed, that the people involved are going to be completing their parts. Send it out 24 hours before the meeting. It doesn't mean that it's completed all the way, but it gives people an opportunity to read through. You do want to have the postmortem doc completed before the meeting, though, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that 24 hours in advance. And it sounds like a lot. It's not as much as you would think, though, because these are things that you're going to be talking through after a major incident happened anyway, right? We don't just walk away from major incidents and be like, okay, that's over. We're not going to talk about it again. Well,
it occurs
I hope
to me
not.
that if it's a really bad incident, you don't want to get in there and give people just free reign to start pointing fingers and casting blame. You got to have some kind of structure.
Well, and also, I mean, one of the things that you're looking at in this is, you know, you're also agreeing on that external messaging, both the internal and the external messaging.
Yeah.
You're making those agreements too. But I mean, I would say the key thing are gaining buy-in for the action items and sharing the learning across the organization are two of the main elements.
Okay, nice.
Any other questions? Was this, I hope this was helpful for somebody.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I had one. So you kind of mentioned when you kick off the postmortem postmortem process that the goal is preventing the same incidents from happening again. But I mean, at least from what I found, it's usually more like preventing similar incidents from happening again. So is that kind of more in line with your thinking? Because usually when the postmortem comes, it'll be like, oh yeah, this is kind of like that thing that happened a year ago. Right?
Yeah, and keep in mind, I've been up since 4 a.m., so words are becoming harder. But like, I guess the same would be in the case that you didn't take any action items to prevent this from happening in the future. So the exact same thing could happen again, right? What are you going to do about it? But most likely it's for similar things, because if it's a major incident, we're probably going to fix it.
Or you would probably kind of, you know, identify resources that are loose in that general portfolio or system as part of the retro that would potentially cause a similar outage, right?
Yes.
If you will. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering if that's kind of how most organizations are approaching it. If they go in with preventing the same thing in mind, or if it's kind of preventing incidents in this family of systems or incidents from happening.
Yeah. So in preventing the same incident, you're agreeing on what to do to make sure you don't have the same incident in the future, right? But you're sharing the learning, because, you know, we all know that similar stuff continues to happen. And yeah, sorry for the words.
No, not at all. I was just kind of curious what the general mindset is.
You're spot on.
Okay.
What other questions? Anyone?
Going once, going twice. All right. Well, Julie, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for some reason, I thought this was a little bit shorter. So I actually kind of glossed over some information a little bit quicker. I didn't realize we still had a whole half hour left, but I mean, does anybody want to talk about how it works in their organization? I'd love to hear other people's idea, like what's going on in organizations and really what's worked well. And honestly, if there are things in our process that you think are gibberish, tell me. Let's talk about how we can make it better.
I just saw you put up that thing, poorly worded, investigate monitoring. And I'm like, I've seen that. I've seen somebody put that on a retrospective.
Yeah, there's that one that said, fix that, don't let it happen again, or something like that. There's an idea.
Yeah, because we've never seen any of these things happen before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sitting here trying to think, have I ever actually been part of an official postmortem? And I don't think I have. So, of course, I've typically been involved with much smaller shops. So there was only 3 or 4 people that knew what was going on anyway. But I would be interested to hear how it goes with other people, because you've got to have a brave and open organization. And let's face it, the bigger a company gets, it's kind of rare that you see that kind of forthrightness, where somebody's willing to admit culpability, willing to be vulnerable, and all those things that they say we should do, but no one ever does.
Yeah, that's the leadership buy-in piece. And you can really gain leadership. You can get them to come over to your side when you hit them with numbers, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research on this. So like I said, Lindsay Homewood has a great article. Google, I mean, their study on high-performing teams. I mean, you can read Nicole's, it's normally sitting right here, but I think it's sitting behind me, Nicole's book, Accelerate, right? The Science of DevOps. And they talk a lot about this. And when you hit leaders with the understanding that when people are afraid, it takes longer to make stuff happen. Good or bad, right? Well, not bad. We want not bad things, but it takes longer to resolve incidents. It also takes longer to innovate and to get things to market, because people don't want to take risks.
Definitely.
Why we talk about embracing failure so much in DevOps. I mean, gosh, I think that was one of the first things I heard about DevOps. I was so confused. I'm like, what? We're embracing failure? But that's what the postmortem does too. It shows that we embrace it as an organization. And if you're bringing this to your org and you start small and you can actually show via numbers, you'll see a decrease most likely in your mean time to resolve. You'll see that decrease as you start opening up about what's going on, or you'll see less incidents. Because again, Dan, going back to we have so many incidents, we can't do postmortems. That's the organization you want to start them in the most. And it's not the only time I've heard that. I've heard that from quite a few large organizations.
You know, as you're talking, I was thinking that there was I was working for a VP at a particularly large energy company at one point, who shall remain nameless. And we were talking about the idea in the leadership team at one point of having a failure of the week, having an email where we send out and we highlight, this is the thing that we screwed up this week. From the standpoint of, if you're not trying, if you're not going to ever screw anything up. If you're out there swinging for the fences, you're gonna blow some stuff up. And I remember distinctly that we were talking about it, and the VP saw that it could be a great thing, but boy, it took him about 5 minutes before he determined, no, I don't think we should do that. Just don't talk about the failures so much. But it is the way to create a learning organization. I like the fact that you had that bullet point on there, that this is the way that you create a learning organization, by highlighting what you did wrong and how you can make it not happen again, get better.
Yeah, Colonel Nicole Malachowski, she's the very first female Thunderbird pilot. And actually, she came and spoke to us at PagerDuty. Wow, she's amazing. She actually talked about this and how they did it in the Air Force, and how they brought in this kind of failure of the week type thing. It was, I think, a failure of the month, but they literally got up on stage and celebrated their failures, which, think about it, the military, celebrating their failures, but it can be, if it can be done in the military, it can probably be done in every organization. I mean, it is a great idea, but again, you have to get leadership to buy in. So you can start with, this is what we started to do on the team, and then this is what came out of it.
Sure.
Yeah. Probably don't give a really big monetary award, though. I feel like people might be incentivizing the wrong behavior.
Yeah, that makes sense. Any other thoughts from the congregation?
Well, gee, I want to say thanks for having me, and stay cool in Texas because I think it's hot there right now.
It's actually not too bad, but you know, it is Texas, so it's going to get nice and warm for too much longer. I will say thank you.
Hey, sorry, Julie, can you please share the presentation if it is possible for you?
Yeah, I'm going to send it out to Dan. Dan, I'll send you a copy of these slides and you can share it out.
Will do. I recorded the session as well, so we got that.
Thank you so much, Julie. I mean, you know, you touched the psychological topic, you know, I mean, you know, that's basically the psychological aspect, actually, you know, kind of cultivating the teams. You know.
Well, thank you.
That's
And
very good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
thanks for having me. I'm really, actually, this was like the perfect way to end my day today with a great group of people.
Wait, you got another meeting after this? I'm kidding.
Oh, I get to be done.
No. Look, fantastic, everybody. Like I said.
Oh, I get it. Wow. That it took a long time to get if I have another
man, you
meeting
are
like that
timely.
after this. No, you are the great people. Haha, very funny.
Well, Julie, I'm gonna
Thanks,
get where is it, down there, over there to Idaho, and hang out with you at DevOps Days at some point soon here, hopefully.
Absolutely.
When we get back to normal. Guys, we start the second half of 2020 tomorrow. Just keep it in mind, we're halfway through. We're gonna make it. Wash those hands, and let's keep each other honest.
Very good. All right. Thanks all.
Bye.
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 Bye.